house, every Arizona homeowner's best friend.
Do you have any raised beds yourself, Romy?
I do, too.
Two? And how tall are they?
Little past knee height.
Little past knee height,
okay. Measured it. I bought railroad ties. Now, you got to be careful with this because they're soaked in creosote, and obviously you don't want that leaching in. So I had to put a liner in. So I started with a screen weed cloth. Then I put these railroad ties around it, and they're 3 layers, three ties high, and then line the inside with a liner. Then put in your base, and then your square foot gardening mix.
So what kind of liner did you use on the perimeter to keep that acetones out and all that stuff?
Just a construction plastic.
Yeah, there you go. And so there's a lot of different ways people try to protect the surfaces, because if you've got block walls around you, maybe you're going to build a raised bed and it's going to be up against your block wall, and your neighbor behind you may not like the water spots that are probably leaching through there. And so it's important to know what kind of materials can I do. Can I just use a basement sealer? A basement sealer can work, but sometimes if there's still enough water, and if your density of your soil that you're backfilling with is high enough, that water's going to work laterally and it's still going to percolate through that wall. And so a plastic barrier, just like you were describing, is a good idea. Now, we've seen a lot of other ideas out there, what people do. And so I'll describe a couple of them and kind of tell you pros and cons, I guess, of a couple of them. We've seen people put tar paper on the wall, and then that creates a solid barrier. Now, the challenges with that are there are some potentialities of toxins coming back into the soil if you're growing edible foods, especially root crops that you may not want to have in there. But it is a good type surface. You just kind of almost glue it or tack it to the sidewall before you backfill it with the soil. And tar paper can work, but it's not really made for connecting with a soil surface. And so it can degrade, it can break down. So might want to maybe not just do tar paper. So others we've seen, they'll put in asphalt shingles. So they'll do the same thing, kind of heat it up the backside a little bit and stick it on that block wall and the asphalt shingle side on the interior of the garden. And that's actually a little bit better, but still you end up with a potential toxin issue. And the way to get around that, if that's still a viable option for you, it's kind of a semi-permanent, because you can still pop those off the wall. It's not hard to clean off the wall if you end up removing those raised beds. But what you want to make sure you do is just make sure you're not planting within about 6 inches from that wall, just to make sure that you don't have any potential issues with those toxins that might leach into the soil. Now, that said, a good plastic liner, or even a pond liner, non-PDM kind of pond liner, or even those chloroplast signs that are used for political stuff. That's actually a pretty cheap or inexpensive way to help clean up those street corners after an election, for, help out those poor blokes that didn't win the election or whatever it is. So just by helping them take down signs and using those, that's actually a great one, because it also creates a little bit of a insulative barrier from the walls as well as a waterproof barrier. And so that's another way. And then you can just mulch it over a little bit over the top. You never actually see that thing. So it works actually pretty good.
And you're not going to need a liner in every case.
No, you won't. Especially if you've got a more high density block wall or a concrete type wall, or even wood. I mean, wood itself is semi-permeable, and especially if you've got my favorite woods would be like a cedar wood. That'll last the longest without having to worry about it. Redwood or high-grade redwood, because there's a lot of different grades of redwoods out there. There's a soft redwood that you can literally kind of carve it with your thumbnail. I would stay away from those if you're doing a raised bed. But if you get a higher grade redwood, usually from a lumber yard, so not just a bulk supply store that has redwood. Those are typically fence grade redwoods, which are very soft. What you want to have is a little higher grade redwood that can hold some pressure. And when it gets wet, it's not going to actually degrade, whereas the softer redwoods would degrade a bit faster. And the amount of years it takes, usually about 8 years. If you're using regular pine, it'll take about 8 years for that to really biodegrade. And so you kind of know your timelines for that if you're using pine. But if you put a filter fabric, so just a weed fabric on the interior of that pine, you can actually extend the life of that considerably, almost double the amount of life just by putting some weed fabric. And that weed fabric can also act as a bit of a water barrier that channels the water down into your garden a little bit more. So it's another option, just putting some weed fabric around the interior, just like you were putting at the bottom of yours, right? Try to keep the Bermuda grasses or other things probably growing up back through it. Putting those on the sides also helps with keeping the stuff from leaching through. And one of the other challenges when you start stacking wood for a raised bed is that when you're watering it, the water and soil can actually go between the slats. So another way to avoid that is putting the weed fabric on the sides of those walls as well, and that keeps it from getting the nasty little dirt kind of filtering through the little cracks on the sides and causing some problems later on. If you want to keep it looking good, I mean, you might as well, set it up for success from the beginning, right?
Rosie on the house, every Arizona homeowner's best friend.